sector ultimately make decisions about their careers, they fulfill their career by serving the public. So we spend a lot of time with our staff saying, you know, we understand that this affects you and it's frustrating, but you still have a job to do. And you need to go do it, do the best you can do. If you're running the roadblocks, come back and let us know what's going on. Because it's very hard when you're constantly in the paper every day. And what you see a lot of times, right, wrong, or different isn't right. And you know it's not right. And you're just like, it's, you can't change what they printed. All you can do is move forward with what you did. And especially in Lansing, we have the state lawmakers and we have the governor fighting with the mayor, and we get tied into that. All of a sudden you'll find in the paper, why are we doing this? Well, a lot of times what's there is not really what's really going on. But the important thing is making sure the employees understand where they stand and how they can get their work done and how the political decision may affect them. The worst thing you can do is make a decision and not really explain how it's going to affect the employee if it does. You hope with the compromises that it's more at the management level, but it doesn't always work out that way. I have a lot of experience sitting in City Hall.
So what did you mean by spotters?
During a storm, with our system, we have a fairly large system.
Mm-hmm.
So spotters basically are trained. We have two sets. They're trained individuals that don't repair lines. So there are engineers, our distribution engineers, our electricians, because basically when you have a large storm, everything stops. When we call spotters out, it means we usually have more than 5 circuits that are out, and we've got 25 wire downs or more. Then we call spotters in. They're trained, they're A and B, and they're 1 and 2. They have a designation of, they work in the field every day, they understand distribution, but they're not hands-on, so technically a distribution engineer. They are an electrician who works hands-on, but don't spend time in the field, so they get married together. We have spotter pairs. I created the program, so, but that's what we do. We call them in, and then we basically, we give them to our operations center in pairs to go out and spot lines and do restoration tickets so that we can figure out how fast to restore things, so that all of our operations center is just handling how to get the safety done, cut and run, wires down, and then start putting things back up in rotation of how many customers you can get back on. So they're trained, they get retrained every year. It's a fairly tight ship that we run with our spotters. They have training, they have a gear bag, they have two-way communication. We don't put them out at night. I was the first person called at the ice storm from operations because I was on duty, and I don't live very far from work, so I had to creep in, and the first thing I said was, I'll start calling people, but they cannot start coming in until first light because it's too dangerous. It's just too dangerous to have anybody out here till they can see what's going on. So, yeah, it was a long month. I'd like to say it was the longest, but I'm thinking the cybersecurity event was longer. that was different. It's nothing like not having email for 4 weeks.
So what
I
was
don't have
that?
a problem with that, do I?
Some people don't. That's the interesting thing.
They see, they make fun of me
Yeah,
because they're
okay.
flip phone and I'm a paper and
If you go paperless with him, it might be a problem.
Paperless doesn't, yeah, paperless doesn't
24/7.
mean no paper. It means just the right paper filed electronically. People always think when you say paperless, they're never going to have a piece of paper, but that's not what it means.
We have spotters here too.
Yeah.
I'm a spotter, Perry's a
Yep.
spotter.
in my neighborhood, I am, aren't I? Mark,
Not as well trained as your crew in Lansing.
Yeah.
Mars out here and
Yeah, we actually have C-spotters too, and C-spotters are, when we do have a wire down, we don't leave it, so we call a C-spotter out to watch it until we get a cut and run crew. And our C-spotters also do things like arrange for housing, do running, make sure meals are provided, do clerical work, whatever's necessary. So we have a skill set list that we use that, you can pull from. So, yeah.
So you mentioned that cybersecurity event. Can you describe at least what you can tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm new to the IT area, and I'm definitely not the network architecture person. I'm more the business process, how do things connect, and how do we integrate. I don't really know. I don't actually know exactly what happened. There's very few people do. The FBI and our cybersecurity folks that we had to bring in know. We're supposed to get a report, but generally, there was a payload dropped into one of our systems through a JavaScript, through a website, and it got opened. And it was ransomware. So,
oh, I know
And-
that.
Yeah, he's.
the problem with that was that we, our IT department, what they had represented, where our backups were, was not what happened. And so it got into, anybody whose computer was connected to the network was ransomed, and all 340 of our servers and our backups were ransomed.
Ouch.
Wow.
So the ransom part took us about a week to figure out and get all the codes back. Cleaning all the computers and repairing them all and setting all the systems back up. And understand the board, we have extremely complex systems. I mean, we've got control systems, we have a huge CI that's on an old mainframe. The control systems didn't get hit, luckily. It was all on the network side. But it exposed, for better or worse, some of the issues we had in our IT area. Our director and manager are no longer there. So we're replacing them. So I was kind of the partner to the director, because I'm on the business side, so I basically help him get his IT folks that don't talk business sometimes to the business folks who don't talk IT. That's my role right now. So.
Cool, thanks. I think we're on my questions here. So a couple I've got for you. One is just, based on your research about this, Lowell and the community here, what major challenges and opportunities for the city and the community of Lowell do you think we'll experience in the next 10 years, and how could Lowell Light and Power ensure the most positive outcomes for those scenarios?
Well, I think where everybody's going is with their energy usage, in making sure that we continue to move to renewables. That's one big one. I know you guys are part of MPPA, so that helps, because you have that pool to draw from, and you can keep those contracts strong and work towards getting more and more renewables. That's going to be a good thing. One, for just stabilizing pricing. Gas prices are low now, but where are they going? I think, I don't know much about your distribution system. I did some research, but the way it's laid out, I don't know how much you have backups and things and hardening that you've done. When you move towards a distribution automation type system, which eventually you'll get there, you're a small system, but eventually you'll probably want to get there. The board's working towards it, and slower than I would like, but there's a lot of hardening that has to happen. I'm looking at some of your distribution lines coming into town. It looks like you've got some updating that might need to be done in some areas. I saw some interesting Hendrix on a pole. I wonder what kind of right-of-way issue that was. But I think that the distribution system generally in utilities gets neglected longer than it should. I don't know how you guys have done with your replacement programs, but I know at the board, which I'm finding is typical talking to other utilities, it's always the last thing. Especially if you have power plants, they tend to suck your revenue, they tend to suck your capital. It's gonna break, and it goes there, and then you have trouble with your distribution system. So I think keeping your distribution system hardened and starting some automation, because customers are gonna start to want more and more of that. I mean, I sat in a meeting with GM, and they said, we never want to have a power outage again. I said, okay, can I never have a recall again? But that's where people are getting. They're getting to a point where the tolerance and the education of that tolerance, backup generation is a huge thing for me right now. I think that with the outages, we had an outage 2 weeks ago on a Friday. Our entire Eckert dropped offline, including the substation that feeds 38,000 customers. And the calls come in, and people don't have backup generation. Distributed generation I think is going to be a big thing in the near future for solving some of the problems with the sourcing. I've looked a little bit at some of your I don't have the contracts, their MPPA contracts, but I know how they work, because I worked on the Bell River one before. I think that's helpful, but continuing to push towards some of the renewable energy, especially as legislation starts to move that way. If we do end up with another Democratic president, I think that's not going to stop. I think we're going to be pushed more and more towards conservation and renewables, and we need to prepare customers for that.
And how would that benefit the greater Lowell community? The folks who aren't really worried about Light and Power so much as just the community itself. How would Light and Power, what you just described, how could that benefit?
I mean, it makes us be an advocate for the environment. I think that as a utility, you should always be the advocate for the environment. You should be the one thing that stands out, that says we're doing the best we can to provide you with what you consider to be essential, which is power, at a green, in the greener environment. I know you guys have a great tree program. We do too. Planting trees in the right place, that type of thing. I think those are excellent programs, but proving as a utility that you're green and that you're conserving and that you're not adding to the footprint, that you're reducing from the footprint, it helps the whole community understand that. Utilities kind of get a bad rap for being the polluters. We all know that that's true and not true based on your industries that you have. But leading by example is the best way, I think, by being green and being able to keep your rates low and doing that, but being able to gauge that expectation if they do have to go up. You've never seen rates go down really, but you can hope. You can hope. I think that's important as the utility sets that example. Especially in smaller communities where they're not really thinking about being green or what the impact might be in the future. It's where I come from, there's more of a message. We get pushed from the colleges and we get pushed from the legislature. But here, you're kind of isolated. So being that example, I think, really helps to kind of push that next generation. Try not recycling in my house. It's you get to that point where the next generation really picks that up. And I know in our community, a lot of our younger homeowners now are asking for smart grid, and it's kind of a source of frustration. When can I have it so I can do better? That's coming. And I think in a community like Lowell, I'm not sure what your turnover rate is right now for the senior versus the younger population and who's moving in and out. But you start to see that you need to start paying attention as a utility, how that's going to affect how fast you move with programs.
Okay, well, thank you.
Kelly, by the end of this
That's-
year, we'll probably be the largest percentage renewable municipal utility in Michigan.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did notice
Yeah.
don't you have a biodigester
We have
coming online? Yeah,
biodigester
that's
and
awesome.
Ranger, and our wind, we're
Yep.
probably going to be close to 30%.
That'll be awesome. Yeah, and that's a great feather in your cap to be able to say that.
Oh, yeah.
Recently, there's been a discussion, let me back up. Lowell Lane Power has been an RP3 designation for the last, I think this is the third go-around, in which we're the top in the top RP3 category, so we've been very reliable. The question is, and it comes up occasionally, and what's your view of above ground, underground? And I'll tell you that we are 99% above ground currently.
97.
97? Okay.
So in my career, I have written 7 proposals to move major corridors underground, and not one of them is gone. Primarily because when the public looks at overhead and says it's ugly, we want it gone because of storms, they don't see the ancillary pieces that go to that. Third-party pole attachments, right-of-way issues. Switches on top of poles are almost invisible on the ground. They take 20 by 20 foot spaces. I'm a proponent of keeping things overhead but hardened where you need to. Moving things underground is very difficult in a town as old as this. I was just in Provincetown, Massachusetts, for a family wedding, and I actually took pictures of the power line. My husband's like, seriously? I'm like, look, we're in the heart of downtown, this old, beautiful little city, and all the power lines are overhead. And the reason why is because it floods, they have very, very hard winters, and there's no place to put it underground and then maintain it. So I think where it's appropriate in new development and where you're redoing an entire corridor and you have the opportunity, and you can partner with your telcos and everything, you should look at it. But, saying that you're just going to move the assets underground and move them underground financially I've never been able to make it work. There has to be something huge going on to do that. I did one undergrounding project back in the late 90s on the Capitol Loop. And the only reason it made sense is because the state was funding to move the homes from overhead to underground and pay the telcos to get out of the way. Because when they relocate, they don't really get anything for it. And that's the only project I've seen successful. But it took some funding from the feds and the state to do it. And it was a long project. And I don't want to go in any more of those basements. It was kind of in an area to try to improve the area, and a lot of them were rentals. It was not fun. But, so I'm a proponent of if you can keep it overhead and you can keep it operational, which is important, which is why the sooner you can go to smarter circuits, if you can do that and have the capability, they have the better ability to do restoration. Been doing a lot of work on smart circuitry and how to make that work for communities where that pressure for overhead to underground comes in. It's difficult in a downtown area or in a community where it's already been overhead. I live in a historic district in East Lansing, and we have underground power lines behind our house. And my neighborhood was like, we need to go over underground in the right of way, after the ice storm. I'm like, okay, so here's what happens. And when you start explaining all of the things that have to happen, And you know, that okay, it can happen, but here's the cost, and here's what happens. And here's the property you have to give up that you haven't given up, and what has to happen to your house. And you can't force people to take underground service if they have overhead unless you make some sort of edict when you're affecting their property. Those are the things we've always run into. You know, it's always good to have the explanation for the customer. You should never say no until you've analyzed it. But I'm a proponent on overhead when it needs to stay, because it's a huge investment, and it's a good investment if it's maintained. Now, it's not going to be tornado-proof, but we just had an outage yesterday in East Lansing in a completely underground subdivision. It took us 3.5 hours to find the outage. If it had been overhead, probably would have taken less than an hour. It's pretty when it's underground, but
You don't have to sell me, I'm just trying to get a feel for where you're coming
She's
from.
not at all passionate about that.
no. I mean, I think, you know, underground, it makes sense. It's just that people have to understand the ramifications if they try to do something where there's already overhead. It has to be a fairly large infrastructure project to move it to underground.
So out of everybody at the table, I probably have the least amount of expertise when it comes to understanding the technical side of this industry. Can you explain to me what you mean when you talk about hardened lines?
I mean, to me, on distribution, hardening makes sure that your poles are in good shape. When you have deteriorated poles, a light windstorm can cause a lot of problems. Because when one pole goes down, a lot of times it's more than one pole going down. Making sure that your fusing and your wires are solid, that you're doing proper inspections for connections at the top of the poles. I didn't see how many third-party pole attachment folks you have, but monitoring that. I know during the ice storm, I was just praying that the wind didn't pick up, because we have more pole attachments on our poles than I would like, and that's a point of failure because they're not heated. The electric lines eventually will melt off. The communication lines, it takes longer. So knowing that where your stresses are on your poles, making sure your coordination on your circuits is correct, so they're not over tripping, they're not under tripping, and making sure your trees are trimmed, which is a huge issue for everybody. I know you guys are a tree city. I loved your poster downstairs with all the different heights of the trees. I designed a plant a tree in the right program for our Adopt a River, and we give away free trees every spring, 6-footers, because we cut down trees. So that's part of our putting our footprint back. And that was a program I designed when I got heavily involved with our Adopt a River program about 12 years ago. We decided to give back, and we were doing a lot of cutovers, and there's a lot of angst around trees, and having the right policy that blends the keeping of the trees and knowing what's likely not to happen versus making sure you have that safe space around the tree for the nuisance blowing. That it's important to have a good policy.
We are in the process right now implementing a SCADA system, and then also smart meters. So I mean, just.
Are you planning to use your smart meter MDM as kind of a OMS light? Is that what you're doing?
It's what?
Are you going to use your smart meter MDM as like an OMS light?
We all look at Greg.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
That's cool. That's perfect. Yeah, that makes sense.
OMS is outage management.
Outage
system.
management system?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we have a fairly complex, I assumed you probably didn't have one here because of the size. Yeah, but a lot of smaller utilities are using their meter data management system as kind of an OMS light. It doesn't allow you to do the switching, but the SCADA will.
Right, okay.
So.
And that's what you were explaining to us before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we just upgraded our energy management system because we have obviously transmission and distribution, and then we're doing our outage management system. Then we're going to be moving into the the distribution system management, which is where you would go next for smart switching.
Do you see your, here's another question for you. What's your views on, as a board, we've looked at, okay, what other things can we do besides power? So we're, investigating fiber optics, fiber on a pole, different things. Have you had any experience? I mean, besides, the power industry, what else?
So in the the early 90s, just after I started, the board investigated going to the cable business at the time. Internet wasn't around yet. Cable business, and so I actually authored the paper doing the research that proposed to our board that we not do it. But understand Lansing already had, at the time, 5 cable companies in play in our service territory. Now we have 32 fiber providers and communication providers in our service territory. So I have a lot of experience in kind of doing the pros and cons and whether or not it works for a small community, which it tends to work better for a smaller community. The one thing that always is the kind of showstopper and you need to make a business decision on is that once you open those poles up for you serving telecommunications, the rules change about how you can control your poles. That's a big difference. The FCC rules come into play. When you're not providing service, the rules are one set, and when you're providing service to those customers under the same rules, the rules change. So you have to kind of look at those, and they've been changing quite a bit lately. I've just been getting back into that because we're getting ready to put collectors on our poles for our media data management. But those are things to look at. You know, there's definitely business opportunities for things like fiber to the home, for providing high-speed internet, partnering. It sounds like I think you guys pay the water. You guys collect water bills, right?
They can pay it here, but
It's not a full-time thing. It's just they can do it. It's like a okay.
Same thing as they can pay their light bill at
Right.
City
You
Hall.
got the reciprocal.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you provide all the billing services, or does the city, or do you have 2 separate billing?
Two
services?
separate.
Two separate.
Okay. There's an opportunity.
There's been conversations in the
Yeah.
past.
Those are opportunities you look at, especially when you're working closely with the government, is, you know, not blurring the lines, but where does it make sense to have one provide the other service under contract or vice versa? For instance, at the city of Lansing, we provide all of their sewer billing and take all the heat for it. But, you know, we made that business decision years ago, and so they don't have a way to collect sewer payments at the city. It's all done through us and through our billing agencies. So there are, you know, those are the things you look at, what's best for which situation, you know, everything down to what happens to the employees doing that work. You want to make sure you look at those things too. But do you have street lighting systems here? Do you own them, or are they leased?
The city owns them.
So the city owns the asset and you maintain them?
Correct.
Okay. So there are things to look at sometimes with street lighting too, on how you manage that to help both the city and yourselves. The model that we adopted at the board is that the board owns and operates all the street lights, and it's a flat monthly fee for each component for the cities. It helps them manage their budgets and repair and replacement better. So it's like an all-in capital up front, so they don't have to dish out a ton of money for a project. We did it as a, you know, over time to recoup. And that was a negotiated settlement about 20 years ago to make our communities easier to keep them lit, but not having to know, oh, subdivision's going in and they had to have this huge asset push to put streetlights in. Or one neighborhood fighting with the other neighborhood about, well, they have them, but we don't. So we help smooth that out as a utility by changing our rate structure and recovering differently. So those are things you can look at too from a standpoint. As far as other product lines, you don't have a steam system, so, or
But we
chilled
could.
water, but you could have a
We're
steam.
kind of set up for,
You could. Steam
could.
lines are fun to run,
The two,
and after 100 years, they're fun to replace.
the 2 combustion turbines we have are simple cycles, so all the heat is not captured at this point, but our facility is set up so that we could ultimately incorporate a steam turbine.
And, you know, and it could be site to site too. It could be for a specific industry that you want to attract.
Right.
Those are types of things that can happen when you have those opportunities available.
so you're coming from a pretty large system to a relatively small system by comparison. I mean, how do you think that adjustment would go?
I don't think it would be an issue for me, really.
Yeah?
It's kind of, I kind of like the idea of being able to touch all the
It's like
systems.
semi-retirement, isn't it?
No, so she thinks it's just going to be easy
No.
straight over here.
No.
You have to clean the bathrooms too.
Yeah, right. And I think that for me is, I've always been willing to do anything. So for me, it's not about, well, I only did this. During the cyber incident, I'm not really part of the technical team. I'm kind of the business side. I'm like, put me to work. What can I do? And so I helped write the procedure for cleaning the PCs with our cyber people, and I basically helped get that done, and I did it, If I'm sitting there supervising, I can do it too. So those are the types of things. I'm kind of a hands-on person. I like people to make their decisions and make sure they know what their authority is, but I'm willing to pitch in. So going to a small system for me, the more I know about it, the better off I am. I'm fine with that. It'd be nice not to drop 38,000 customers.
You'll never do that here.
2,200 here.
Well, it's funny because I haven't had strategic accounts for about 6 years, but my phone just blows up when that happens. My husband calls me because he works behind the Capitol. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh. because he's like the listening ear for that building, the capital calls, GM calls. I'm like, call your strategic accounts person.
So, and I don't know, sometimes I get myself in trouble because I don't know the legalities of everything. So, if you were to become the general manager of Lowline Power, would you be relocating into the district, or would you be commuting from, again, I assume you're someplace in Lansing?
I'm in East Lansing, actually. Yeah, I live about a stone's throw from the college on the north side. It would depend on the financial impact. I'd have to look at that. I mean, the goal would be to get here, but it would just be, I have a child in college who lives at home, and my husband works in Lansing, so, and you know, the financial opportunities, it would depend on the offer, how I could do that. I mean, the goal eventually would to be here more full-time. It's closer to the lake anyway.
What kind of questions do you have for us, Bill?
I know you've got a strategic plan. Have you done a strategic plan recently?
We have an ongoing strategic plan. It's,
We keep revisiting
I was gonna
that
say,
every other
we
month.
recently did a.
Well, you should do it every couple years.
Yeah.
So you have your goals set really for the utilities to where you're headed? Okay, it's good to know. I like to know if utilities have them and they're not just sitting on the shelf and they're using them. So that's one. How many employees, the posting is at 17 or?
17 in total. There's probably 12 or 13 full-time and then a handful of part-time. And that changes.
Sure, goes up and down, I would imagine. So do you hire out like your misting and stuff like that? Or do you have somebody
No, we
internal
do
who
that
does it all?
internal.
Good, okay.
We try and do everything internal. We do most of our own
Perfect.
tree trimming internal. We do our grounds maintenance internal. We
Nice.
do misting internal. We all wear a lot of hats.
I mean, we
It's that
did,
Small utility there.
no, we did, I mean, we hired out, under the previous general manager. I've been on the board for, I don't know, 10 years, 9, 10, 11 years. Greg's just about the same. And we did hire that out, and it was approximately, we were spending $200,000 a year in tree trimming and everything, and we, again, had it, a lot of it, and so then we took a different direction that our guys could maintain that, and we have a recent hire that we think is an outstanding, you know, it's kind of like what you talked about before, or people have talked about is, I guess it was previous, that we're all replaceable at some point.
Exactly.
And we always think we've got the greatest employee, and then all of a sudden somebody else comes along and you're going, wow, is this person really? And that's what's happened. That's kind of what's happened all the way through, as long as I've been on the board. New
It's not
people-
unique to you.
New people
It's
have
not
come in,
unique.
and you're going, you always think, how are we going to replace this person? And
It happens.
lo and behold,
Yep. But it's also why it's important to make sure that, it's also important, that's why you want to make sure that you have duplication in efforts, that at least somebody understands their backup and the documentation is in order. There's nothing worse than having your distribution engineer of 45 years retire and then nobody can do the GM billing because he had some weird spreadsheet he used. That
And
just
we-
happened to us, so that's what I'm telling you.
we don't have an engineer on staff, but we use
Mm-hmm.
GRPS,
Makes sense.
GRP engineering.
So you guys serve the city of Lowell proper, correct? Not
Correct.
A
you.
little bit of the
And a
township.
little bit of the township? Do
Two
you-
townships, 25% of our total customer base is outside the
Outside,
city.
okay, I kind of thought that. So do you compete for Wire's business at all? Or have you signed an agreement with consumers and the other,
We haven't signed a 411 agreement, so to speak, but we do compete.
so you do compete? Okay. Have a lot of experience with that. Ugh.
It's, because we're rural and small, we probably come out better than most.
I would think so. I would hope so.
Our ears are to the ground and we get there first.
That's good.
Nimble.
That's good. Yeah. You can tell I like public power. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I actually worked on the 425 agreement and the agreement for Jack's National Life and dealt a lot with Consumers Energy folks, and they're blocking us to build a line.
Mhm.
And it was just like, really? Yeah.
Right.
And you just have to, at some point, you know, be like,
In
okay.
fact, we just, within the last 4 years, I guess, we took the largest industrial customer in our area back into our service territory.
Really? They let you bring it back?
they didn't have a choice because it was inside the city limits.
Oh,
but
awesome.
They've been outside
Sorry.
for 25 years. They've been outside for 25 years.
Nice, okay. Yeah, and that's what happened with Jackson National Life. They signed a 425 agreement in the middle of Alden Township and Okemos, and it became City of Lansing proper, and I had no choice, I had to serve it.
Mhm.
Boy, it was fun trying to get there, so. But, so who's your largest customer?
We have a couple. King Milling
Yep, I saw that.
is probably the largest customer. Then we have a company that does marine business. They're a division of Brunswick called Atwood.
Okay, yep.
We have 2 or 3 other manufacturing on the north side of town. One is Metric, they do automotive supply. And we have Lighthouse, which does salad dressings. And,
Oh, yeah, okay.
we actually have a partnering agreement with them on our biodigester. We take all their liquid waste, pipe right to our facility.
Nice.
And then Myers is a huge customer, so.
Have a
Those
few
are
of
probably
those.
our 5 or 6, and then the high schools, the school
School system.
Yep, and yourself, right?
And ourselves.
You're always one of your larger customers.
That's right.
We are anyway. So, yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah,
Got some diversity in there.
we do.
I've got one of those more classic interview questions, so I meant to ask and I forgot about, but in the last 5 or so years, it's, what's your greatest achievement, but also your greatest disappointment, and how did you learn from each of those?
So greatest achievement was actually getting the go to start doing Smart Grid, because in our organization, there were folks who thought we didn't need to do it. And now we're behind. So my greatest one was finally a full-blown business case. It's a $36 million project. Yeah, it just needed to get done, so we're finally there. So that's a big accomplishment for me, because we had a lot of, what's the best way to put this? We had a lot of, yeah, we're gonna do it, but not really. With our change in management, it finally
Okay.
got honed home with the business case.
So, on that, just quick asking, so was your not wanting to or not thinking you need to, was that coming from the board, from employees, or from the community?
It was coming from some internal staff who were not informing the board of the impacts, in my mind. It was not, I don't think enough information was being passed through, and it was some politics from the city hall not wanting us to invest that money in that way. And I just think it was not, as a public issue, it's happening. And as the utilities, large as a board, we're behind. And I think finally being able to show in a business case the benefit in less than 9 years of even a longer implementation than we should have, of 14% payback in 9 years is huge. And I think that for me, being able to finally get that through was a huge accomplishment, and make sure that the not only the CFO understood it, but also the general manager understood it, and the impacts rolling downhill from that in the way we do business. It wasn't really an issue for our customers. I've got more customers asking than not. They're kind of irritated we're behind. So, biggest disappointment, I think, was not being put in upper management at the board at the time Peter was there. He had a different management style, and we clashed. I'm just gonna put it that way. I did what I could to help him, but he just had a different style, and it was not in keeping with the way I like to see a public utility run. Let me just put it that way. I liked him. We did a lot of projects together. He had a lot of great ideas and a lot of momentum. It's just from my standpoint, in working in the public, I just have a different set of, requirements, I guess is the best way to put it. Being as honest as I can with you. I recently was very close to being the director of IT. I was second in line. They wanted to really bring somebody in from the outside to do the look. Kind of glad I didn't get that position now. Just saying. Yeah, and I'm glad, we are going to go back out for an IT director, and we're going to do something more on the cybersecurity, and I'm glad with that. I don't have any hard feelings about not getting the job. I was helping the director. I was at that level anyway. But I was disappointed in not, while Peter was there, being moved to that next level. And I think that was, partially just the way he ran things. And I still got used that way, I just didn't get moved there. And so that was kind of disappointing. At that point, I think I would have really liked to have that experience sooner in that organization. But I get to do a lot of fun things, so I'm good with it.
So what did you learn from that disappointment?
Really just that it doesn't change what I do. It doesn't change my influence in the organization. It's just for me, moving my career forward. I didn't really feel like it was moving forward, and that's why I'm here today, because I really kind of want to step out. You get comfortable when you work for a public utility, because you get to do a lot of different things. Usually it's a pretty fun job. Even when it's not, it's still fun. I think I got comfortable, and I was like, nope, I need to start stepping out and looking at seeing what else I could do. And this was one of the first things that came up when I made the decision to do that.
Okay. So when you mentioned your management styles clashed, like, how so?
I said I'm a very open manager. I want to know where the pitfalls are. I want to hear everybody's thoughts and opinions. That was not the case. He didn't want to hear it, and especially when it came to setting precedents. When you work in a public utility, if you make a decision for a customer that's going to set a precedence in your public, everybody's going to find out. Dealing with developers is the same way. We went through an era in the 90s like that, and our general manager was let go due to preferential treatment, fiduciary responsibility. Then I spent 12 years getting that side of the business back into no developer. Yes, we want to work with you. We're going to do what we can, but here are the rules. You don't get to call the general manager and get what you want, and that worked well until he came in and it started to go backwards again. So when I see the cycle going back, that's what I'm talking about. And his management style was just going back into that, putting a lot of people in jobs that necessarily weren't qualified, which I have a huge issue with in a public utility.
Good old boys club.
A person with no management skills, who's not managed anybody, who has never done distribution engineering, who doesn't understand our rules and regs, has never been mentored into the position, gets put as a manager over an area that's very complex. That's not good for the employee or the employees under them, and certainly not for the public. So for me, putting the qualified people in the positions and not your friends isn't very important. You serve the public. It's a safety issue. It's a huge safety issue. And just having one wrong person in the wrong spot, it's not a good thing.
And we got to wind it down. For me, one last question is, have you attended any APPA national conferences, different things? And I'm just, as a board, we've encouraged that. We encourage our boards members to attend meetings, and we also encourage our employees, take an employee with, we think it's important, and I guess, so have you?
Yeah, I've attended some in the past, not recently because we've had so much work going on, but I've gone to rate making classes, some of the underground design, overhead transmission. I've never actually been to the national conference because it always ends up either getting around me or being at a different time. But I have done quite a bit of travel for the board in either learning environments. I've attended several executive conferences for the executives because they couldn't go on, employee building, replacing engineers, that type of thing. But I actually would love to go to the national conference for APPA. I've done pieces of them, but not gone to the national. It just hasn't been afforded at the right time.
Okay.
All right, well, we're 3 minutes from our next candidate, so we better wrap this up.
And I talk fast
Any
too,
lingering
so.
questions?
I don't think so. Just what are the next steps in your process?
Well, I think basically we're, going to review what we have from today, and I think in probably the next week or so, be deciding whether there's another step or whether it's very clear, and be in contact with you one way or the other sometime in the next week or two
Okay,
as to what the next step is.
perfect. Well, I appreciate all of your time today.
Thank you.
It was very
Yeah,
informative.
thanks for coming in.
Yeah. Steal your bottle of water.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, appreciate it.
It's nice
Thanks.
meeting all of you.
Kaylee, right?
It's Kelly.
Kelly.
I have the most common first name spelled so differently.
Well, I see it's 2 E's.
And it's funny because